Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. Chapter 11. Stalking. After the horrifying nature of Chapter 10, you may be prepared for all of the second half of the book to be rather dark. Chapter 11 changes that. She describes the process of stalking. Of course, she's not hunting to kill, she's hunting to see. And in that way, there are many ideas within this chapter that mirror the ideas of the seeing chapter. She opens the chapter by reminding us that it is summer. We're still moving through the seasons. There is no chapter specifically labeled summer in this book, but she's still clearly using it as a framework, and also still perhaps changing the meaning of the seasons as she goes through them. Primarily, the summer serves to hide things that she's looking for. Unlike the winter that revealed so much, summer sometimes makes it difficult to see things. She also spends the first few pages of this chapter describing Eskimo hunting traditions, which even in the summer are fraught with cold and danger, but also prepare us for her stalking. On page 186 she says, "In summer I stalk. Summer leaves obscure, heat dazzles, and creatures hide from the red-eyed sun. And me. I have to seek things out. The creatures I seek have several senses and free will. It becomes apparent that they do not wish to be seen." In some ways, some of her stalking of the animals here mirrors her stalking of the coot in the winter chapter. The coot who completely did not care that she was following it. Here, the creatures do care, and take great pains to avoid being seen. She then describes her stalking process. "I can stalk them in either of two ways. The first is not what you think of as true stalking, but it is the via negativa, and as fruitful as actual pursuit. When I stalk this way, I take my stand on the bridge and wait, emptied. I put myself in the way of the creature's passage, like spring Eskimos at a seal's breathing hole. Something might come, something might go. I am Newton under the apple tree, Buddha under the bow." Notice the connection back to the seeing chapter and to the present chapter. This unself-conscious being there. She's going to explore this idea in depth again in this chapter. She continues saying, "Stalking the other way, I forge my own passage, seeking the creature. I wander the banks. What I find I follow doggedly, like Eskimos haunting the caribou herds. I am Wilson, squinting after the traces of electrons in the cloud chamber. I am Jacob at Peniel, wrestling with an angel." One question comes to mind. Is there a difference in Dillard's mind between the ideas of stalking and the ideas of seeing, since she describes both of them in very similar terms? Over the next several pages, she describes several things that she stalks, and the various complexities of looking for each of these creatures. The one she takes the most time on in the first part of the chapter are fish. She says that fish are hard to stalk both in the passive and the active way. She says, "Although I spend most of the summer stalking muskrats, I think it is fish, even more than muskrats, that, by their very mystery and hiddenness, crystallize the quality of my summer life at the creek." A moment later, she says, "Fish, they manage to be so watercolored. Theirs is not the color of the bottom, but the color of the light itself, the light dissolved like a powder in the water. They disappear and reappear as if by spontaneous generation, sleight of fish." Then she begins to connect fish to its traditional Christian symbolism. Since catching them is like catching a revelation, she says, these fish are spirit food. And she clearly links, in language, the searching for fish to her ideas within the present. You can see them if you want to, catch them if you can. It scatters and gathers, it comes and goes. But then she changes back to muskrats, stalking muskrats, what she calls eye food, rather than the fish spirit food. Part 2 of the chapter is almost entirely describing her interactions with muskrats. She reminds us that she is aware of their dangers, the way they are hunted for food, the many deaths they can die, but she's also looking at them with charm. She describes several instances of getting up very close to muskrats, using her via negativa method, putting herself in their way and letting them come to her. Even times when she was within a few feet of them, close enough to reach out and touch them. And these muskrats never notice her as long as she stalks them the right way. After one description, she says, on page 200, "But he never knew I was there. I never knew I was there either. For that 40 minutes last night, I was as purely sensitive and mute as a photographic plate. I received impressions, but I did not print out captions. My own self-awareness had disappeared. It seems now almost as though, had I been wired with electrodes, my EEG would have been flat. We're reminded, of course, of her description of self-consciousness within the present chapter. And she describes how she had to lose her dignity in order to accomplish this, being willing to freeze in any particular posture. On page 203, she describes this saying, "I am not excited. My breathing is slow and regular. In my brain, I am not saying, 'Muskrat, muskrat, there!' I am saying nothing. If I must hold a position, I do not freeze. If I freeze, locking my muscles, I will tire and break. Instead of going rigid, I go calm. I center down wherever I am. I find a balance and repose. I retreat, not inside myself, but outside myself, so that I am a tissue of senses. Whatever I see is plenty, abundance. I am the skin of water the wind plays over. I am petal, feather, stone." Part 3 of the chapter takes this idea of stalking, and this idea of stalking using the via negativa method, and applies it to science and the numinous. It is often difficult to see things in nature. She compares this to the principle of indeterminacy Werner Heisenberg discovered in 1927, an idea she describes as flying in the face of our concrete understanding of science through our perspective of Newtonian physics. She says, "We think that at least the physical causes of physical events are perfectly knowable, and that as the results of various experiments keep coming in, we gradually roll back the cloud of unknowing. We remove the veils one by one, painstakingly adding knowledge to knowledge and whisking away veil after veil until at last we reveal the nub of things, the sparkling equation from whom all blessings flow." And yet, the principle of indeterminacy points out that some knowledge is impossible. Some mysteries cannot be unveiled. The discovery was that it is impossible to know both a particle's velocity and position. As soon as one of those variables is nailed down, the other is gone. She says, "The use of instruments and the very fact of an observer seem to bollocks the observations. As a consequence, physicists are saying that they cannot study nature per se, but only their own investigation of nature. And I can only see bluegills with my own blue shadow, from which they immediately flee." It seems, therefore, that science cannot answer every question. Some things, when sought, hide from us and become like the creatures in the creek. I think it's often easy for those who don't have a strong grasp of either science or spirituality to feel like the two are diametrically opposed. But Dillard, in her naturalism and her transcendentalism, sees a unity between them. There is still mystery in science, and mystery is fundamental to spirituality. I'm reminded of Nietzsche, who was not very enthusiastic about religion. If you remember, he's the one who said, "God is dead," and also that God is the opiate of the masses. But he also warned that it's all too easy to replace God with science. And having an intense faith in science, I believe in science, is really no different from a faith in God. And I love the way Dillard lets spirituality and science go hand in hand in this chapter. She connects this finally once more to the numinous. In the story of Moses, who asks to see God's glory, God tells him that if he were to see his face, he would die. Moses, however, is allowed to hide in a cleft of a rock, covered with God's hand, until God has passed by, and then Moses could peek out and see the back of God. She says, "Just a glimpse, Moses, a cliff in the rock here, a mountaintop there, and the rest is denial and longing. You have to stalk everything. Everything scatters and gathers, everything comes and goes like fish under a bridge. You have to stalk the Spirit too. You can wait forgetful anywhere, for anywhere is the way of his fleet passage, and hope to catch him by the tail and shout something in his ear before he rests away. Or you can pursue him wherever you dare, risking the shrunken sinew in the hollow of the thigh. I sit on a bridge, as on Pisgah or Sinai, and I am waiting becalmed. And I am both waiting becalmed in a cliff of the rock and banging with all my will, calling like a child beating on a door, 'Come on out, I know you're there.'" She applies both types of stalking to this quest for God, this theodicy that she's on. And occasionally she gets the glimpse. On page 208, she says, "These fleeing shreds I see, the back parts, are a gift, an abundance. When Moses came down from the cliff in Mount Sinai, the people were afraid of him. The very skin on his face shone. Do the Eskimos' faces shine too?" And so she concludes again with the Eskimos, the same place she began, stalking, hunting, and occasionally catching that glimpse that makes one's face shine. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.